Should I buy a new home or an existing home? That's the question we're going to cover today. If you're thinking about buying a new home or an existing home that's maybe up for resale right now in the Pittsburgh market, we're going to cover the pros and the cons of each, and let's talk through which situation makes the most sense for you. Number one, let's talk about finishes. Let's be real. The reason that you're buying a new construction home is you get to pick what you want, right? If every resale home had exactly the layout, had exactly the open floor plan concept that you were thinking about, they had the color scheme that you've been looking at, if it had everything, you would buy the resale. When you're buying new construction, the benefit of that and the reason that people love new construction homes is they get to pick their finishes. They get to pick the flooring, they get to pick the color scheme, maybe customize certain things, maybe they get the ability to finish the basement how they want. So when you're looking at new construction, this is probably the main reason that people buy new, right? And if I'm buying a resale, let's say it's a 20-year-old home or a 30-year-old home, maybe some of these things have been updated to today's tastes, but a lot of them maybe they haven't. And a 20-year-old update or a 30-year-old update, the trends have changed. And so when you're really looking at what are the pros, cons, I mean, the biggest pro to buying new construction is you get to pick the finishes that you want, the style that you want, and you get it the way you want it right off the bat. Second thing we're gonna look at when we compare new versus resale is the price per square foot. How much home are we actually getting for the price that we're paying? Now, when you're actually looking at a new construction home today, maybe in a bigger plan or a development, you're going to pay more on a price per square foot basis than you would on a resale property that was maybe built 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Especially, we have a lot of older homes here in the Pittsburgh area. And so the newer the home, the more likely you're gonna pay a higher price per square foot. And sometimes that can be as much as $50 or $100 a square foot more for new construction. So yes, you're getting what you want. You're getting the home that you want. You get to pick all the finishes. You get all the positives of that. However, you may not get as much size as you would with a resale home. And so a lot of times when we look at price per square foot analysis and we have somebody looking at a 20-year-old home or a 30-year-old home that has some really nice finishes and compare that to a new construction home, the price per square foot that new construction home is going for is oftentimes and typically much higher than that 20 or 30-year-old home. And so if you're really looking at how much bang you get for your buck, you're generally going to get a little less with new construction than you are on a resale home. Number three, this is something that most people don't typically consider right off the bat, but then you really start to get into it once you own that home for a few years, and that's the lawn and the landscaping and sidewalks and things like that. Generally speaking, when you're coming into a new development, there's not going to be a lot going on as far as landscaping and lawn is concerned. You're not going to have mature trees in most cases. You're going to need to redo all of that. A lot of times there's some local builders around here, they barely even put a sidewalk in. They're going to put the absolute minimum that they can when it comes to driveway size or walkways or decks or patios. Like they're going to put, that back patio might be a little postage stamp. And so when you really start to look at new construction versus resale, and then you start to think about what do I need to do from a landscaping basis to maybe get that up to speed with what something that's been around for 20 years or 30 years, where that is at in terms of, just mulch beds, flowers, like anything like that. You start to look at, okay, there's really not a lot that comes with new construction. Some builders are going to be different than others. Obviously, they might have a lawn and landscaping package. They might, they're going to come in and seed, but you might be living through a muddy yard or a muddy mess for a little while when you buy that new construction home. And then over time, you're going to have to continue to chip away at that. And it's an expense that you really typically don't have as much as you would, when you're buying a resale. Everything's pretty much there and done, and you're just coming in and continuing to maintain. And maybe you need to make some updates, and maybe that's a negative of a particular resale home that you're thinking about buying, is they have done a poor job with the lawn, the landscaping, the manicuring of everything, and that's obviously a con in that scenario. But typically speaking, most people forget about the exterior when they buy new construction, and they're talking about price per square foot, and they end up finishing, and then they get in there and they're like, I don't know, we still have to do a lot on the outside of this, and it's an additional expense sometimes people forget. And so when you're looking at the two, make sure you take into account what you're going to have to do on the outside of that home. Number four, let's talk about lot size and privacy. Typically in a new construction development right now, they need to fit every home they can in that particular development. The lot sizes that you're generally going to get are as small as the builder quite honestly can get away with, and still have people pay a premium for those homes, because having bigger lot sizes loses the builder money at the end of the day. And so you might come in and you might have a postage stamp lot, and you might be right on top of your neighbors, and you know, a lot of times with new construction, that's what you're going to get. And you can't really blame the builders. As long as people are willing to pay for it and willing to buy it and willing to deal with smaller lots, they're going to continue to do that, and that's going to help them maximize profits, of course. However, resale homes, you're generally going to have a bigger lot, you know, depending upon the area, the neighborhood. And as you start to get back, maybe pre-1970, we tend to have a lot bigger lots in certain parts of our suburbs and areas. As you get into the city, obviously they're gonna be reduced. The city lots are gonna generally be smaller, and they'll probably end up being smaller than a new construction lot. However, when you're talking suburbs, you're generally gonna get a little bit more space. You're gonna get a little bit more privacy than you maybe necessarily would with a new construction development. And I think the only case that probably doesn't fit is like a typical city lot, or as you get closer to the city here in the Pittsburgh area, obviously the lot sizes are small. You know, the homes are right on top of each other, and that's city living. But I think when you look at suburbs, you're generally going to get a bigger lot, a little bit more privacy than you would with a new construction home built in a development. Number 5, this is something that most people don't really think about, but I think comes into play here a little bit more and more recently, is a lot of times the new construction developments that we see are probably built a little bit more on the outskirts of where things are built up from a neighborhood standpoint, grocery, shopping, retail, all of those things. Unless they're coming in and they're building some big master plan where it's gonna have commercial and retail and shopping and food and the development beside that. Generally speaking, your new construction homes are gonna be built a little bit further out. You're gonna have a little bit further commute. You might have to drive a little bit further to get to that school or to get to shopping or grocery or any of those things, where resale, a lot of times they've been there a long time, it's established, and there's been enough time for the commercial to catch up to at the retail establishments and restaurants, and they tend to come in. So you tend to be a little bit closer to certain things. In a lot of cases when new construction, obviously there are exceptions to every rule depending where that is, but it's, you know, for a developer or a builder, it's harder to find land close to everything, or they're going to pay an absolute premium, and those numbers may not work. And so a lot of times they have to build a little bit further out in order to find the type of land that they need to build the amount of homes that they want. And so sometimes that location is a little bit different. And the other part of that, when we talk neighborhood and location and things like that, just the maturity of the neighborhood. And that comes from everything from commercial to retail to shopping, but also tree sizes and woods that surround neighborhoods, and really the overall look and feel of a mature neighborhood. You know, for example, you know, you might have a home that was built in the 1950s. You still have huge oak trees and shaded areas, and the lawn and landscaping has been there forever. And so as you get into those older developments and those older plans and homes that have been there forever, and you have established neighborhoods, it's generally a different look and feel. You also have some of the cons to that is you still might have overhead power lines. You might, you know, everything might not be buried like it used to be. You might have, you know, some power outages. You're dealing with tree limbs. You're dealing with leaves. So there's pros and cons to both that, but a lot of times you're going to have a more mature neighborhood is generally going to have some of those, you know, the larger trees and look and feel like it's been there in an established neighborhood, and generally closer to that shopping. Whereas the new construction stuff, maybe not. Maybe a little bit further out there. You're not going to have as much shade unless they've somehow managed to work in trees and things like that. But a lot of times you're going to have to wait for them to grow. And so when you look at an established neighborhood and the overall look and feel and location to everything, the resale tends to have a little bit of a leg up. Let's talk about number 6 here. Maintenance and warranties. This is where new construction obviously is going to have a leg up. Everything's brand new. You know, our roof is going to be 1 year old when we move in. The, you know, furnace, AC, all that stuff is going to be brand new, and we're going to have warranties on those items. Not to mention we're going to have a builder's warranty on that. So when you're moving into a new construction home, everything's going to be brand new. That's the pro. That's the positive of moving into a new home versus a resale home. The downside to a resale is it's really going to depend on when things have been updated, right? If I'm buying a 20-year-old home and nothing has been updated in a while, I'm probably going to be budgeting for a new roof. I'm probably going to be budgeting for a new furnace. I'm probably going to be budgeting for a new AC unit at some point in time in the future. And a lot of times we build in warranties, and you can continue to pay on a home warranty that helps to cover some of those costs, but it's not going to cover a new roof, and it's not going to cover certain items that are going to need to be updated from a cosmetic standpoint or just from wear and tear and things like that. So when you start to get in that 20-30 year range, everything tends to start to need to be updated. And so that's something you really need to take into account when you're buying a resale. A lot of times you have a little bit more negotiating power. You're going to be able to buy at a lower price per square foot. Maybe build in some closing cost assistance to take into account some of the things that are going to need to be updated. However, when you're looking at warranties and new and problems and things like that, new construction's obviously probably the way to go, because everything's going to be brand new. It's going to have a warranty and it's going to be totally protected. So should you buy new or should you buy a resale home? Really, it depends on your scenario, right? If you want shiny, new, you want the look and feel, the modern updates, you want no problems, you want to have all of the warranties and security in the fact that everything is brand new and you're going to get exactly what you want. However, you might pay a little bit more for that. New construction is probably the way to go. If you're really looking at, I want the best deal, I want the most bang for my buck when it comes to price per square foot, I'd rather have a mature neighborhood. I don't want to be on top of the neighbors. I want to have a little bit larger lot. I want to build in, and I want to come into an established community. I want to be able to make some updates the way that I want to make them, and I can, I'm comfortable with the home and the condition that it's in, and I can make some updates over time. But I really like being close to everything, and I like that neighborhood. Then maybe resale's the route that you want to go. And you probably can get a little bit better deal when it comes to price per square foot. However, everybody's different. Everybody has their wants, needs, and really at the end of the day, their preference as to which direction they go. So new construction is going to work for some people, resale is going to work for others. If you want to talk through the differences between price per square foot, the pros and cons of a particular neighborhood here in our area versus what the resale homes are selling for, we'd be happy to take you through those items, those statistics, and we can talk through which one's best for you. If there's anything that we can do, as always, reach out to us anytime. We're here to help.